πατέρατα, βραχίων υψηλό, και σώσαντι τον Ισραήλο την εδόξαστε. Υπεραγία Θεότο και σώσον ημάς, ότι παρακλήσεως τη Θεοτόκο, πιστή προσέχονε μιλασμόν εντουμένη, των εγκλημάτων ημών, και του εχθρού αποφύγην και σωτηρία ψυχών. Υπεραγία Θεότο.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the God's Word News Service program, the Bishop's Report. I'm your host, Bishop Grigori. This evening's report is titled Mass Shootings and a Government Connection. I'd like you to all understand that neither the Second Amendment nor the NRA or the legal gun owners in this country or President Trump and his administration have any responsibility in any way of the mass shootings across the United States. The left is using these shootings as a ruse to cover up what and who is really responsible, and also to hide their own hidden agenda. There is a very real connection between psychotropic drugs and mass shootings, which those on the left, including the mass media, lawyers, and politicians, have been covering up. And I would hazard a guess that at least 97% of those involved in mass shootings and many cases of suicide among teens and young adults over the span of the last 20 to 25 years share one thing in common. And that is the fact that the shooters involved were taking at the time of the shootings or had been on at some point very powerful psychotropic drugs such as Ritalin, which have very well-known side effects such as suicidal tendencies, severe depression, and many other violent behaviors, which many physicians and mental health experts claim are warning signs of extreme mental illness, calling for immediate intervention. And these signs do include feelings of being disconnected and being withdrawn, diminished coping skills, illogical thinking, difficulty perceiving what is real and what is fantasy, violent outbursts, either verbally, physically, or in posts on social media sites, and suicidal thoughts. And there have been reports from around the world of aberrant and or violent behavior manifested by those taking psychotropic drugs. The following list of mass shooting perpetrators and the drugs they were taking or had been taking shortly before the horrific actions was compiled and published to Facebook by John Noveske, founder and owner of Noveske Rifle Works, just days before he was mysteriously killed in a single car accident. Eric Harris, age 17, first on Zoloft, then Luvox. And Dylan Klebold, aged 18. They were involved in the Columbine school shooting in Littleton, Colorado. They killed 12 students and one teacher and wounded 23 others before killing themselves. Klebold's medical records have never been made available to the public. Jeff Weiss, age 16, had been prescribed 60 milligrams daily of Prozac. That's 3 times the average starting dose for adults. when he shot and killed his grandfather, his grandfather's girlfriend, and many fellow students at Red Lake, Minnesota. He then shot himself. Had a total of 10 dead, 12 wounded. Corey Badsgard, age 16, Wahluke, Washington State High School, was on Paxil, which caused him to have hallucinations when he took a rifle to his high school and held 23 classmates hostage. He has no memory of the event. Chris Fetters, age 13, killed his favorite aunt while taking Prozac. Christopher Pittman, age 12, murdered both his grandparents while taking Zoloft. And Matthew Miller, age 13, hung himself in his bedroom closet after taking Zoloft for only 6 days. Kip Kinkle, age 15, on Prozac and Ritalin, shot his parents while they slept. Then went to school and opened fire, killing 2 classmates and injuring 22 shortly after beginning Prozac treatment. Luke Woodham, age 16, on Prozac, killed his mother and then killed 2 students, wounding 6 others. And a boy in Pocatello, Idaho, in 1998 had a Zoloft-induced seizure that caused an armed standoff at his school. Michael Carneal was on Ritalin. He was age 14. He opened fire on students at a high school prayer meeting in West Paducah, Kentucky. 3 teenagers were killed, 5 others were wounded. A young man in Huntsville, Alabama, on Ritalin went psychotic, chopping up his parents with an axe and also killing 1 sibling and almost murdering another. Andrew Golden, age 11, on Ritalin, and Mitchell Johnson, age 14, also on Ritalin, shot 15 people, killing 4 students, 1 teacher, and wounding 10 others. T.J. Solomon, age 15, on Ritalin. He was a high school student in Conyers, Georgia, where he opened fire on and wounded 6 of his classmates. And Rod Matthews, age 14, on Ritalin, beat a classmate to death with a baseball bat. The list goes on, naming 28 more names of mass shooting perpetrators and the drugs they were taking or had been taking. And despite what the leftists and feminist organizations would have you believe, they were not all males. At least 4 to 5, maybe 6, were females. Those both on the left and some on the right who are pushing to further draconian firearms bans, as well as the destruction of the NRA, are placing all of their attention and efforts on the wrong issue. And they are asking the wrong questions. Now, this is due to either a conscious and deliberate ploy to hide the obvious links between the psychotropic drugs and the mass shootings and violent behavior, or they are woefully and utterly ignorant, or they're trying to hide something else. And this brings me to the question of why are our children being prescribed these dangerous psychotropic drugs to begin with? And what is the government connection? First, let me stress that children and most young adults are not in any legal position to give their consent to being placed on these drugs. And those who are old and mature enough to give their consent, the healthcare professionals fail to adequately explain how dangerous these drugs are. Also, the brains of children and young adults are not fully developed. They are still growing, and all psychiatric drugs interfere with the normal growth of the brain. Very few of our children and young adults or their parents have been told that taking any antidepressants do not work on children, and that these drugs can cause permanent damage to their brain function and can lead to chronic apathy and permanent sexual dysfunction. So why are they being placed on these drugs? Our public school system, as well as many parents, use these drugs as a matter of convenience in an attempt to control hyperactive children. These children are diagnosed as having ADHD and immediately placed on psychotropic drugs to control their behavior. Very often, side effects are far worse than the conditions, such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, for which they're prescribed, and they rival illegal street drugs in terms of their dangerous risk to health. The long-term effects in children are most often unknown, but the short-term effects are a shocking increase in violent and aggressive acts committed by teens taking one or more of these psychotropic drugs. One shocking detail is that the number of prescriptions for psychotropic drugs for U.S. children has more than doubled between 1995 and the year 2000, and that foster children are prescribed such drugs at a rate 12 times higher than other children on Medicaid, which is not done by mistake. The high rates of psychotropic drug use among foster kids and poor children is a direct result of drug company tactics that target doctors in the Medicaid program, influencing them to prescribe more drugs to these kids. All parents of children who have been diagnosed with ADHD are potential customers of the drug companies who are experts at marketing psychiatric drugs directly to them through advertising campaigns run on television commercials and in magazines such as People and Good Housekeeping. Now that I've explained how the psychotropic drugs have affected the behavior of the perpetrators of these mass shootings, let's explore how the CIA and other government agencies are involved. It is a known and proven fact that the government agency known as the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, ran a top secret project known as MK-Ultra, in which they conducted hundreds of covert experiments, often on unwitting U.S. citizens, for the purpose of assessing information gathering and psychological torture. The CIA claims to have shut down the program around 1973. However, the details of the illicit program did not become public knowledge until 1975, during a congressional investigation into widespread illegal mind control CIA activities within the United States and around the world. The MK-Ultra program involved more than 150 human experiments that we know of, involving psychedelic drugs, paralytics, electroshock therapy. In some cases, the test subjects were aware that they were participating in a study. However, many had no idea what was being done to them or why, even when the hallucinogens started taking effect. What is worse, many of these tests were being done at many of our top well-known universities, hospitals, prisons, both here in the U.S. and in Canada. And it is not entirely clear just how many people were involved in the tests, due to the fact that the CIA kept notoriously poor records and destroyed most MK-Ultra documents when the program was officially halted in 1973. But I, for one, do not believe that this illegal program was ever completely shut down. Under the control and authority of Project MKUltra, the CIA began to fund studies at Columbia University, Stanford University, and other colleges to study the effects of the drug LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide. After a series of tests, the drug was found to be way too unpredictable for use in counterintelligence. MKUltra also experimented with MDMA, known as ecstasy, mescaline, heroin, barbiturates, methamphetamines, psilocybin, also known as magic mushrooms, and Ritalin. MKUltra also ran an operation known as Operation Midnight Climax, in which the government employed prostitutes to lure unsuspecting men to CIA safe houses where drug experiments took place. The CIA agents then dosed the men with LSD. And then while they, the agents, at times drank cocktails behind two-way mirrors, watched the drug's effects on the men's behavior. The majority of these experiments were conducted in San Francisco and Marin County, California, and in New York City, with little, if any, oversight. And those CIA agents involved admitted that a freewheeling, party-like atmosphere was the norm. And one agent, named George White, wrote the following shocking letter to Sidney Gottlieb, who was the CIA's chemist and poison expert who headed the various drug experiment projects. He said in the letter, quote, "Of course, I was a very minor missionary, actually a heretic, but I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun, fun, fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, deceive, rape, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest?" End of quote. The All-Highest is a reference to the director of the CIA. Now for a quick introduction to Frank Olson. Who was he? Frank Olson was a scientist who worked for the CIA. At a CIA retreat held in 1953, Olson drank a cocktail that had been secretly spiked with LSD. On November 28, 1953, Olson supposedly tumbled to his death from the window of a New York City hotel room in what was alleged to be a suicide. Frank Olson's family pushed for a second autopsy, which was finally performed in 1994. A forensics team found injuries on the body that had likely occurred before the fall. This led many to believe that Olson might have been assassinated by the CIA. And after following a prolonged legal battle, Olson's family was awarded a settlement of $750,000. And they also received a personal apology from President Gerald Ford and then CIA Director William Colby. Now, under the CIA, the federal government, it was fully known how dangerous the psychotropic drugs are, especially if taken by children. So why in heaven's name are they allowed to be administered to our children? Now, let me explain the government conspiracy connecting the government to most, if not all, of the mass shootings across the U.S. Now, just as sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, so too some conspiracies are not theories. It is at this point that I want all of you to put on your thinking caps and listen carefully to the following, and then draw your own conclusions and see if you arrive at the same conclusion that I have. Let's start by going back to when Barack Hussein Obama first started campaigning for the office of president on February 11, 2007. During his entire campaign, he kept telling the American people how much he supported the Second Amendment to the Constitution. But shortly after being elected, he started pushing for Congress to start enacting gun control laws, even though the Constitution does not give Congress or any branch of the federal government the right or power to make any such laws. Then, under Obama's administration, his Attorney General, Eric Holder, devised a plan, along with the FBI and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, called Operation Fast and Furious, which allowed guns, especially automatic and semi-automatic weapons, to be sold in the U.S. and sent to Mexico. Project Fast and Furious began in November of 2009 and took place out of the Phoenix office of the Bureau of the ATF. Suspected criminals were allowed, under direct orders of the FBI and ATF, to purchase and take firearms, and the firearms dealers, the gun stores, were ordered by the FBI to allow this to be done. So they purchased firearms here in the U.S. and then walked them into Mexico with no interference whatsoever from agents. Over 2,000 guns were sold to suspected criminals thought to be linked to Mexican drug gangs in the 2 years of the operation under Obama's presidency. Now, the supposed intention was that once the guns were sold to powerful drug cartels, the ATF would later trace the firearms. However, both whistleblowers and investigators were unable to find any attempt whatsoever having been made to trace the guns. Then both the NRA and the New American said that the killing of hundreds of Mexicans and even some U.S. law enforcement officers because of the Fast and Furious program was going to be used by the Barack Obama administration as an excuse for more gun control. And they were correct. But the one thing that many of our duly elected representatives in Congress and the White House, and those demanding that our government either ban some types of weapons or even eliminate the Second Amendment, completely seem to forget that under the Constitution, the federal government has no constitutional right or power to abridge, which means restrict, the Second Amendment in any way, shape, or form, yet they continuously do. If anyone truly knows and understands the Constitution, they would realize that all federal gun laws, along with quite a few others, now in place are unconstitutional. Yet that has not deterred the leftists. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was killed on December 14, 2010 during a gunfight, and the gun used to kill him was traced back to Fast and Furious. Right after the U.S. Border Patrol agent was killed, Obama began once again to push for gun control. And once again, it went nowhere. Then there was the Fort Hood shooting. That took place at the U.S. military base located at Fort Hood on November 5th, 2009. Again, Obama pushed for gun control legislation, which once again went nowhere. This was followed on January 28, 2011, by the congressional event shooting in Tucson, Arizona, in an attempted assassination of Representative Gabrielle Giffords, who was shot in the head but survived, and resulted in the deaths of 6, including a 9-year-old girl, and injuries of several others. And once again, Obama, despite his campaign assertion that he was 100% behind the Second Amendment, openly pushed for strict gun control legislation. The shooter was Jared Lee Loughner, who was on psychotropic medication. Failing once again, there was another mass shooting at the Aurora movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, that took place on July 20th, 2012, killing 12 people and severely injuring 70 others. The shooter was James Egan Holmes, who was 25 at the time of the shooting. He was on psychotropic medication. Once again, Obama pushed for gun control and failed. So on August 6, 2012, there was another mass shooting, this time at Oak Creek, Wisconsin, at the Gurdwara Sikh temple, in which 6 were killed. The shooter was 40-year-old Wade Michael Page. And though it was known that he was known to suffer from serious mental illness, it is unknown at this time if he was on any psychotropic medication. And you guessed it, Obama and many on the left again pushed for illegal gun control, which again failed. This led to the horrendous Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting on December 14, 2012, where 20 students ranging in age between 5 and 10 years old and 6 teachers were shot and killed in Newtown, Connecticut by 20-year-old Adam Lanza. And just prior to the school shooting, Lanza shot and killed his mother at their Newtown home. Following the shooting at the school, Lanza committed suicide by shooting himself in the head. Lanza had Asperger's syndrome, and as a teenager, he suffered from depression, anxiety, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. It is believed that he was or had been on some sort of psychotropic medication. So again, Obama and the leftists called for very drastic gun control laws, which once again failed. This was followed up then on September 16, 2013, with the Washington Navy Yard shooting, in which 12 victims plus the shooter were killed. The 34-year-old gunman, Aaron Alexis, was a former Navy reservist and a military contractor at the time of the shootings. Alexis had made contact with 2 different Veterans Administration hospitals for apparent psychological issues. It is unknown if he was on any psychotropic medication. Obama pushed for gun control legislation again with the usual result, and on April 2nd, 2014, there was a second mass shooting at Fort Hood when an American soldier by the name of Ivan Lopez is claimed to have become upset because his request for leave was denied. Lopez killed 3, wounded several others, and then killed himself. He was not on any psychotropic medication. Then came the Kansas Jewish Community Center shooting on April 14, 2014. These were a pair of shootings, one taking place at the Jewish Community Center of Greater Kansas, and the other at Village Shalom, a Jewish retirement community, both located in Overland Park, Kansas, killing a total of 3 people in the shootings. 2 who were shot at the community center and 1 who was shot at the retirement community. The gunman was a 73-year-old Fraser Glenn Miller of Aurora, Missouri. Miller was a neo-Nazi and former political candidate who was tried, convicted of murder and other crimes, and sentenced to death. Miller was a homegrown terrorist who was a member of a neo-Nazi group, and he expressed open hatred for Jews repeatedly. As far as is known, he was not under any mental health treatment or any psychotropic medication. Obama once again called for strict gun control and once again failed. Then on June 18, 2015, the Charleston church mass shooting took place, in which white supremacist Dylan Roof murdered 9 African Americans at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church located in downtown Charleston, South Carolina. Dylan Storm Roof, who was born on April 3, 1994, was an American white supremacist and mass murderer. Roof exhibited obsessive compulsive behavior as he grew up, obsessing over germs and insisting on having his hair cut in a certain style. While in middle school, Roof began smoking marijuana, and in 2010 he dropped out of school and spent his time between playing video games and taking drugs, such as Subazone, a narcotic that is used for treating either chronic pain or opiate abuse addictions, and that itself is abused as a recreational drug. And again, Obama and the leftists demanded strict gun control legislation, and once more there was no mention at all about spending any resources on mental health. On July 16, 2015, we were faced with the Chattanooga Recruiting Center shooting committed by Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz, who opened fire on 2 military installations in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He first committed a drive-by shooting at a recruiting center, then traveled to a U.S. Naval Reserve Center and continued firing, and that is where he was killed by police in a gunfight. 4 Marines died on the spot. A Navy sailor, a Marine recruiter, and a police officer were wounded. The sailor died from his injuries 2 days later. Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz was of Jordanian descent and was born in Kuwait in 1990. He became a naturalized U.S. citizen after moving to this country with his mother, who is from Kuwait, and father Yusuf Abdulaziz, who is Palestinian. Little is known about Abdulaziz's motives and if or when he became radicalized. He was shot dead by police the same morning as the killings he committed. And yes, you guessed it, Obama and his fellow leftists called for the abolishment of the Second Amendment without success. October 2015 brought us the Roseburg Community College shooting. The Umpqua Community College shooting occurred at the UCC campus near Roseburg, Oregon, where Chris Harper Mercer, a 26-year-old, enrolled at the school, fatally shot an assistant professor and 8 students in a classroom and injured 8 others. Roseburg police detectives responding to the incident engaged Harper Mercer in a brief shootout. After he was wounded by police, he turned his own gun on himself, killing himself by shooting himself in the head. He was born in Los Angeles County, California, on July 26, 1989, and lived with his mother during the separation and divorce of his parents, who agreed to shared legal custody. In 2009, he graduated from the Switzer Learning Center, a school for teenagers with learning disabilities or emotional issues. His mother was very protective of him and tried to shield him from various perceived annoyances in their neighborhood. We do not know if he was on any psychotropic medication. However, one can be assured that he was, due to his record of having been at the Switzer Learning Center. February 22nd, 2016, Kalamazoo Uber driver shootings, in which a series of apparently random shootings took place at an apartment complex and a car dealership and outside a restaurant in Kalamazoo County, Michigan. 6 people were killed, 2 others were injured. A 45-year-old Uber driver, Jason Brian Dalton, was detained by police as being a strong suspect in the shootings. He was subsequently charged with murder, assault, and criminal firearm use 2 days after the shootings. After he was found competent to stand trial, Dalton's lawyers planned a legal insanity defense for their client. After his arrest, Dalton confessed to committing the shootings, but he blamed his actions on his Uber mobile app, claiming that its symbol resembled that of the Order of the Eastern Star, and that it took over his body during the events. After he pressed the button of a new app resembling the devil when it abruptly popped up. Dalton certainly was suffering from some sort of mental disorder, but it is unknown if any psychotropic medication was involved. There were other mass shootings that took place during the Obama administration, such as the San Bernardino Community Center shooting on December 2015 and the Orlando nightclub shooting on June 12, 2016. However, these were the work of Muslim extremists. So the point I've been trying to make here is that Obama and those on the left used all of the mass shootings as an excuse to go after the Second Amendment. And each of the shootings, with the exception of 2 or 3 cases, it was learned that the shooters were on, either at the time of the shootings or at some point in the past, psychotropic medication, such as Ritalin. Yet never once was the issue of mental illness and the use of psychotropic drugs ever mentioned by the left. Why? What was their ulterior motive? And to be honest, there were mass shootings that continued into the Trump administration. They also involved shooters who were on psychotropic drugs at some point. And once again, there seems to be a government connection by those who seem to be holdovers from the Obama administration. And consider the following. On October 1st, 2017, at 10:05 p.m., Stephen Paddock, age 64, opened fire from his hotel room onto a large crowd of concert goers at the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival on the Las Vegas Strip in Paradise, Nevada, killing 58 people and wounding 851 others. And here we are today, almost 5 months following the mass shootings, and we still know little to nothing about what led up to the shootings or the mental state of the shooter. And it appears that the FBI, along with other government entities, are involved in some sort of cover-up. And again, the left is screaming for strict gun control legislation. Then, on the afternoon of February 14, 2018, a mass shooting occurred at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, in which 17 people were killed and 14 more were taken to hospitals, making it one of the world's deadliest school massacres. And a 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz was identified by witnesses as the shooter. He was arrested shortly afterward. According to the Broward County Sheriff's Office, Cruz confessed to the shootings and was charged with 17 counts of premeditated murder. Cruz had behavior issues, and he was transferred between schools 6 times in 3 years in order to deal with these problems. And he was transferred to a school for children with emotional or learning disabilities in 2014. He had previously received mental health treatment, but had not received treatment in the year leading up to the shooting. Despite his mental problems, Cruz seemed to have no problem in purchasing firearms, including semi-automatic rifles. What I and many others are wondering is, how is it that even though the Broward County Sheriff's Office received 23 calls about Cruz over a 10-year period, which included tips about his threats to shoot up the school on February 5, 2016, and on November 30, 2017, nothing was done. Then on September 24, 2017, a comment on a YouTube video from the user Nicholas Cruz stated, quote, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter," end of quote. This video was reported to the FBI, but according to the FBI agent Robert Lasky, it was unable to track down who made the comment after conducting database reviews. A statement that on its face is so far-fetched that it's unbelievable. On January 5, 2018, the FBI's public access line, PAL, received a tip from a person who was close to Cruz. On February 16, 2 days after the shooting, the agency released a statement that detailed this information. According to the statement, quote, "The caller provided information about Cruz's gun ownership, his desire to kill people, his erratic behavior and disturbing social media posts, as well as the potential of him conducting a school shooting," end of quote. After conducting an investigation, the FBI said the PAL did not follow protocol when the information was not forwarded to the Miami field office where investigative steps would have been taken. Question: why was this information not passed on to the proper channels? And then an even more disturbing situation has come to light. How come an armed sheriff deputy refused to enter the school when the shooting began, but chose to cower behind a car? Then when more deputies arrived, they also decided not to enter the school. And then they stated that they were ordered to stand down. Why? Once again, the left has riled up the students, their parents, and teachers from around the nation to demand an end to the NRA and even an end to President Trump's administration, accusing them of being responsible for the death of America's children, and even calling for the repeal of the Second Amendment. Now, if one uses common sense, one can see that our own government, through its various agencies, has been allowing those under their control through the use of psychotropic drugs to obtain all sorts of firearms to commit mass murders, all for the purpose of getting the American people mad and scared enough to demand an end to the Second Amendment. This must lead one to then wonder why certain elements of our government are so adamant on disarming legally armed, law-abiding American citizens. Well, everybody knows governments fear an armed populace, since it is an armed populace that prevents a government from becoming tyrannical. Not one NRA member, not one Tea Party member, not one Republican conservative has ever been involved in any of these shootings or murders. They've all been Democrat leftists. This is what happens when we as a nation and as individuals turned our backs on God and decided to no longer follow his laws. It is also what happens when we as citizens become ignorant of our own Constitution. We have also become complacent to the fact that our own elected representatives, elected by us to protect us, instead show more concern for the safety, protection, and needs of those who have chosen to enter our country illegally. Our very own representatives and senators in Congress, along with the vast majority of our judges and justices, who have sworn an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, have blatantly turned their backs on that oath and consistently violated it, their oath of office and the very Constitution they have sworn to uphold and defend. Now, please pay close attention to the warning I'm about to give you, because time is running out, and very quickly. In perhaps another year or two, the United States is going to drastically change, and this change will not be for the good. Last night on my local news, they were talking about how our young people, especially teenagers, have become more politically aware and are now starting to publicly voice their opinions in no uncertain terms. There is now a push on by various leftist organizations around the country to get as many of these young people registered to vote so that they will be ready as soon as they turn 18 to vote. And you also have people, mayors in some states that are pushing to allow illegals and legal non-citizens to vote in their state elections. What makes this very worrisome to me and many others is the fact that these young people have been thoroughly brainwashed and conditioned in our public education system into believing in and accepting leftist ideals and believing in the leftist propaganda that is being spewed out on all of the news, entertainment, and social media networks on a 24/7 basis. The vast majority of the soon-to-be new voters are not only demanding a complete end to the Second Amendment, but also drastically limiting our rights under the First Amendment. They are even demanding that all non-citizens, both those here legally as well as those in the country illegally, be allowed to vote in all of our elections, federal, state, and local. And can you imagine what kind of country this will be if that is allowed? For far too long, we have closed our eyes to what has been being done to the minds, bodies, and souls of our children in our public schools. The indoctrination and purposeful dumbing down of America's children has been going on for several generations now, so that we have finally come to the point that the treasonous leftists have been planning and waiting for. A generation of mindless sheeple, mere robots that will willingly believe and accept whatever lies and disinformation that they are fed by the left, and willing to follow and obey whatever commands they are given. The sad part is that we, the people, allowed it to happen by not paying attention, or worse yet, not caring enough to stop it. There is only one way to turn things around. First, we must all, as individuals and as a nation, turn back to God and start living by his laws. As is stated in 2 Chronicles, if my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Then we must rise up as the people's militia, which our founders intended us to be, and fight and die if we must to defend this land, our families, and ourselves, and the Constitution that the traitors on the left are hell-bent on eradicating. Either we stand together or we hang alone. And don't wait to find out if I am right about what is coming our way, because then it will be too late. Once we have lost our rights, our freedoms, our Constitution, and our country, they will be gone for good, because they will never come back. Have a good night. May God bless and save each of you. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.